Hi, hello, welcome. This is an art critique from Reddit. I'm your host, Unkempt Snugglepepper, and today we have an elf in the desert. With this guy standing here, we're going to explore what does it mean to draw from imagination. And I'm going to reveal the big secret. References. References, references, references. Why? Because when we use a reference, we're going to build our visual library. And the more we build that visual library, the images that are in our head, the more we have the ability to recreate those images. And it starts small with spheres and cubes and cylinders and three-dimensional objects. That's why a lot of drawing 100 or entry-level drawing classes are going to be around still lives, because we're looking at very basic geometric shapes under a single light source. And as we understand those basic geometric shapes, we are able to put them into our artwork. The first thing I'm going to start with visual library is that for something to be this saturated, we want focus on one thing, and that is going to be our main elf. But compared to the golden red sands all around him, he is very desaturated. He doesn't stand out as much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in a layer with black and then set the mode to saturation. And this is true in Krita, Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, which is what I'm using, and Procreate. That this will make everything black and white without having to turn the image black and white. I'm going to put it down at about 50 because I think we'll add more saturation as we go in. And I'm going to merge that down. So one thing to keep in mind when drawing from reference is going to be looking up references of more dynamic poses. And the more you do figure study and study how the body moves and works, the more you can apply that to your characters and give them more interesting poses. With his ears, it appears that they're further forward than a human's ears would be. In At least in humans and usually in elves, there's a little bit of hair that comes down along the side. And then the ears stick out. I would look up reference because there are various elf ears out there where they have redrawn the ear anatomy to resemble what would happen if the ears were elongated. His wrist should come in a little bit. The hand is not completely flat. After saturation and after a dynamic pose, I'm going to focus on two things today, and that is understanding fabric and how fabric works, and then applying it, and also how to pick colors, because I'm pretty sure this is all from the burn tool, which is great in certain situations, but as far as normal, straight out of the gate shading, don't use the burn tool. So the first thing I'm going to think about is, what is he wearing? He's in a desert. Deserts are very hot during the day, cool during the night, and generally people wear long sleeves and pants in order to protect from sunburn. So I'm going to assume he's wearing something light, like a linen. And I know there's going to be a wrinkle at the elbow, which you have the line, the lumpy line, like there is supposed to be a wrinkle, but then in the fabric, you don't know where to put the wrinkles, is my guess. There's also going to be a little bit of a bulge as his belt goes in, and a few wrinkles there. And then under his belt, a few wrinkles there. This fabric, unless there is a wind with him, which I don't see anywhere else, should fall along his side. So I would have it coming down like so. It looks like there may be a little bit of wind, but not the kind where his both sides shouldn't be going up. If there is wind, it usually would go in one direction. So this will come more down. This will join it. was there as well. And that's something that you're going to learn as you draw more clothing, as you research how clothing works. So now that we know where there's going to be wrinkles, that happens anytime the clothing has to fold in on itself, anytime there's a stretch. For example, his elbow is going to be stretching the fabric where inside his elbow is going to be the wrinkle. I think it's an interesting outfit. However, the execution of it was a little off. Now, the next thing we're going to consider is our light source. According to the dunes behind us, it's still sunny, but we also have this magic here. This is where you do want to use the burn tool. Or I'm going to add a layer and use add glow. So now he has a light. And you are correct in that the light source is coming this direction and landing on his arm and on his face. However, you don't have the visual library built up to tell you what happens when you have a strong light source from one side. So then we're going to talk about picking colors. I honestly would say to start in black and white. For the sake of time, I'm not. Black and white allows you to see only values. Is something light? Is it dark? Is it mid-tone? Adding color sounds like it's going to be adding one thing, but it's really not. You now have the issue of hue. Is it red? Is it blue? And you have the addition of saturation. Are the dunes truly a dark purple, or is it a shadow where they appear purple compared to the golden color of the sand? So if this is the local color on his jacket, meaning if you were to pick an average, that's what color you would say it is. A local color of a basketball is orange. I'm going to move up and be slightly more saturated in the midtone. And then as I move up again, I'm going to swing towards yellow. I'm going to move up and I'm going to swing towards yellow. And as I get brighter, I'm still staying fairly desaturated. And then as I go back down, I'm going to move towards red and purple. And then we can go in, start from the beginning. So I know that's our local color. We can go in with some of the highlight because I know this part of his arm is being highlighted. Another thing to consider is when are you using a soft brush versus when are you using a hard brush. It looks like when you went in with the burn tool, you only used the soft brush, which is inaccurate. What do I mean by that? Usually what happens in digital art is we get that airbrush look and we blend everything too far. And that's when we start to get that over airbrushed, overly digital appearance. Don't be afraid of hard edges. I would also say the lack of hard edges can stem from I don't know exactly where the shadows are supposed to go. And then part of his chest is going to get this highlight, as well as over here. And I'm going to say that's as far as his torchlight goes. And then we'll go back down to this color. I'm mostly going to use 3 brushes doing this. One is, it's a hexagon shape, but it's a fairly hard brush with some opacity depending on how hard I press. The other is entitled 300 and it's soft, but it's not the softest brush. It still has a little bit of edge to it. And then in Clip Studio Paint, I also have a smudge tool. The light of his torch is coming this way, so it's not going to be seen on his sides. You haven't indicated in your environment anything that would cause the rim light on his other side. He has a clasp here in his robe, and that's going to create some tension. And that tension is going to be reflected in wrinkles. So now the top of his robes are more rendered. And we can go in with this purple, and we're going to do color picking in a similar way. We have this shade of purple. I would say that's another reason to bring the contrast down in your background, is so that purple is able to be more vibrant. I'm going to move it towards a bluish purple to get my shadows. And I'm going to move it a little bit towards red to get my highlight. The highlight of the purple part of his robe is going to follow the highlight of the rest of his robes. So that's the strongest highlight. His fingers are too long. When we wrap around a staff around that size, they should be closer to there. Oh, no. And the detail of his fingernails. For a full body portrait, you should not be painting individual fingernails. That would be reserved for being very close to the hand. And then since the light is up there, the thumb is going to receive that light. Not quite that much. And it will curve around as well. Now, with the staff, anything up here is going to be very bright because it's closest to the light source. That jagged change, it's not going to be quite black, but it is going to be in shadow. And then this knob sticks out, so it's going to get the light, not a shadow. And then this shadow is going to be lighter. And then I'm going in with my soft brush, since it is a cylinder, and a cylinder has soft shading. We don't want to blur it out into oblivion. All right. Now, I mentioned with the face, but we're going to know that if he has a single light source coming from this direction, that this, oh, yeah, that's far too light and far too saturated. We're going to turn that down to a nice pinky tone. So this is going to be the highlighted side of his face. So the light's coming from that direction. This half is going to be on shadow and a little bit more desaturated. And there's important parts of the face that will have shadow. For example, the corners of the eyes, where the eye socket is, it's one of the most receded parts of the face, and it's going to receive some of the most shading. And then the nose protrudes from the face. So it's going to create a core shadow right here, the shadow that's on the nose, and then a cast shadow across the face. The chin isn't that far over, so it's going to get a bit of shadow underneath. The upper lip will get some shadow. Below the lower lip gets the shadow. And then, of course, his neck. This side is going to get the light. Not all the way over here. So now we have the basic shadow shapes. And how do I know all of this? I have used various references. And I would say looking up references with harsh light, single light source, people who are on stage, dramatic lighting, all of those are going to give you examples of how the face behaves in this lighting situation. We darker on this side. We also have to consider what way the hair grows. Blonde hair is usually not quite this yellow. It's usually a little bit more desaturated. And then it's going to have a shine to it. I'm thinking about the form as a whole, the overall shape of the hair, and then going in and thinking of it as parts, slightly smaller parts. I would also say for a full body, you're going to want to work on a larger canvas. I think this one's under 1,000 pixels wide. Yeah, 960 by 1021. I would probably make it twice that size. Because you can always scale it down. You can't, scaling it up, you're going to lose quality. Yeah, for skin tones, they're more desaturated than you think. So now we're beginning to tell a story through lighting, that his torch is the thing that is lighting all of this. And since he's holding it slightly in front of him, it's going to be in shadow as it goes behind him. So how do I know where to put the highlights and the shadows? I wish it were a really simple answer. In a way it is. I know where the light source is and I know how clothing and the face behave in similar light sources, and I'm able to apply it. So the secret to drawing from imagination is just using more references. And of course, drawing an elf standing in the desert is going to be a very specific thing that you may not find a specific reference for, but you can find reference for what the desert looks like. You can find reference for how the clothing, how linen cloth behaves. Linen is used a lot in very warm climates because it's a very breathable fabric. So knowing how that behaves compared to how cotton behaves, compared to how a wool coat behaves. And it's not the intricate details of it, just that how the fabric falls across the body and where there's tension and wrinkles. Building a visual library also means being able to understand facial anatomy and geometric features, and then which one of those features would catch light if you were holding a magic staff. If you found this video helpful, it helps me and the channel out if you can give it a like, maybe subscribe to my channel. I also have a playlist of these Reddit art critiques. Down in the doobly-doo, you'll also find a link to buy me a coffee as well as submitting your artwork directly to me. That's all I have for this one.